The stars looked cold and empty to Jake Morrison as he stood on the bridge of his ship. 3 months had passed since they lost contact with Earth. 3 months of silence from home. Jake had been a simple exploration captain, leading a small crew to map new star systems far from human space. Now he feared they might be the last humans alive. The ship New Horizon drifted through space like a lost child. Jake's crew of 12 had been surveying the outer rim when everything went wrong. Their long-range communications had gone dead first. Then the emergency channels fell silent. Finally, even the automated beacons from Earth stopped transmitting. Lisa. Carter, his pilot, walked onto the bridge. Her face looked tired and worried. "Still nothing from Earth, Captain," she said quietly. "I've tried every frequency we know. It's like the whole planet just ... stopped talking." Jake nodded, but said nothing. In his heart, he already knew the truth. Something terrible had happened to Earth. The question was what, and whether anyone else had survived. Danny Brooks, their engineer, called from the engine room. "Captain, we're getting strange readings from Sector 7. Looks like a battle happened there. Big one." Jake felt his stomach drop. "Set course for Sector 7. Let's see what we can find." The journey took 2 days. When they arrived, Jake's worst fears came true. Floating in space were the broken remains of ships. But these weren't human ships. They were alien vessels he had never seen before. The hulls were smooth and silver, with strange markings burned into their sides. "My God," whispered Amy Foster, their medic. She had joined Jake on the bridge to see the wreckage. What could have done this? Before Jake could answer, their communications system crackled to life. A voice spoke in broken English with a strange accent. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Kess of the Altarian Fleet. Please respond. We detected your ship entering the battle zone." Jake looked at his crew. They all seemed as surprised as he felt. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship New Horizon. We're looking for other survivors." A pause. Then the voice came back, softer now. "Captain Morrison, we have much to discuss. Will you come aboard our ship? We have news about Earth, news you need to hear." Jake's hands shook as he gripped the captain's chair. "We'll be right there." The Altarian ship was huge, 10 times bigger than the New Horizon. When Jake and his crew docked, they were met by beings that looked almost human, but with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. Admiral Kess was tall and thin, with silver hair that seemed to glow in the ship's lights. "Welcome aboard," Admiral Kess said. Her voice was sad and gentle. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." She led them to a large meeting room, where other aliens waited. Jake saw creatures with 4 arms, others with scales instead of skin, and beings that looked like walking trees. All of them watched the humans with a mixture of curiosity and something that looked like hope. "Captain Morrison," Admiral Kess began, "I'm afraid we have terrible news about your home world. Earth was destroyed 3 years ago." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Lisa grabbed his arm to steady herself. Danny made a choking sound. Amy started to cry. "How?" Jake managed to ask. "The Zephyrian Empire," said a creature with 4 arms. "They attacked without warning. Earth was their first target. They wanted to make sure humans could never fight back." Admiral Kess nodded grimly. "The Zephyrians have been conquering our galaxy for 3 years now. They've destroyed hundreds of worlds. Billions of people are dead. We're all that's left of the free races." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. Why did they target Earth first? "We were just explorers. We never hurt anyone." "Because they were afraid of you," Admiral Kess said simply. "The Zephyrians have ancient records about humans. They called your species the Chaos Bringers. They feared what humans might do if you ever joined the war." "But there were only 12 of us out here," Lisa said. How could we make any difference? Dr. Van, the four-armed alien, leaned forward. Perhaps more than you think. The Zephyrians are a hive mind. They all think the same way. They plan everything perfectly. They never make mistakes, because they never take risks. And humans? Jake asked. Humans are unpredictable, Dr. Van said. You adapt, you improvise. You do things that make no logical sense, but somehow they work. This terrifies the Zephyrians. Admiral Kess stood up. Captain Morrison, we're losing this war. Our fleets are scattered. Our home worlds are under attack. We have maybe 6 months before the Zephyrians win completely. She looked directly at Jake. We need your help, all of you. We know it's asking a lot. You've already lost everything. But you're the only hope we have left. Jake looked at his crew. Lisa wiped tears from her eyes, but nodded. Danny clenched his fists and said, Those bastards killed our world. I want to make them pay. Amy was still crying, but she stood up straight and said, Count me in. Jake turned back to Admiral Kess. What do you need us to do? Help us think like humans, she said. Show us how to be unpredictable. Teach us to fight like you would fight. We're not soldiers, Jake said. We're explorers, scientists. I don't know how to fight a war. Neither do we, Admiral Kess said sadly. That's why we're losing. But humans have something we don't. You have the ability to find solutions when there are no good options left. Jake looked out the window at the wreckage, floating in space. Somewhere out there, the beings who had destroyed Earth were still killing innocent people. His home was gone, but maybe he could help save other homes. All right, he said. We'll help you. But I need to know everything about these Zephyrians. Their ships, their weapons, their tactics, everything. Admiral Kess smiled for the first time since they had met. Dr. Van will brief you on everything we know. But Captain, I should warn you. Once we start this, there's no going back. The Zephyrians will hunt us across the galaxy. Jake thought about Earth burning in space 3 years ago. He thought about all the people who had died. He thought about his crew, the last humans in the universe. Good, he said. Let them come. It's time they learned what happens when you mess with humans. As the meeting ended, Jake felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they had something the Zephyrians didn't understand. They had human stubbornness, human creativity, and human anger. The war was about to change, and the Zephyrians had no idea what was coming for them. Dr. Van led Jake and his crew through the corridors of the Altarian ship. The walls were covered with screens showing battle reports, star maps, and enemy movements. Everything looked bad. Red markers showed Zephyrian-controlled systems, and there were far too many of them. This is our war room, Dr. Van said as they entered a large chamber. Here we track the enemy's movements and plan our defense. Jake looked at the main display. It showed the entire galaxy, with most of it colored red for Zephyrian control. Only a small section in the outer rim remained blue for the free races. How many ships do they have? He asked. Thousands, Dr. Van replied. Maybe tens of thousands. They reproduce quickly and build ships faster than we can destroy them. Lisa studied the tactical displays. Their formation patterns are perfect. Too perfect. Every ship moves in exact coordination with the others. That's because they're all connected, Dr. Van explained. The Zephyrians share one mind across their entire species. When one sees something, they all see it. When one learns something, they all learn it. Danny frowned. That sounds like a huge advantage. How do you fight an enemy that never makes mistakes? We don't, Admiral Kess said as she joined them. That's why we're losing. Every battle plan we make, they counter perfectly. Every trap we set, they avoid. Every weakness we exploit, They fix immediately. Amy was looking at medical reports on the aliens they had captured. These Zephyrians are strange. They have no individual identity. Each one is just a part of the whole. Exactly, Dr. Van said. They eliminated individual thinking from their species thousands of years ago. They believed it made them stronger and more efficient. Jake walked around the room, studying the displays. What about their technology? Can we match it? No, Admiral Kess said bluntly. Their ships are faster, their weapons are more powerful, and their shields are stronger. We've captured some of their equipment, but we can't figure out how most of it works. Show me, Jake said. Dr. Van led them to another room, filled with captured Zephyrian technology. The devices were sleek and seamless, with no visible controls or interfaces. Jake picked up what looked like a weapon, but it remained dead in his hands. They're designed to work with the hive mind, Dr. Van explained. Only a connected Zephyrian can operate them. Danny examined a piece of their armor. This is incredible. It's like the metal is alive. It repairs itself when damaged. And it adapts, Dr. Van added. If you shoot it with a laser, it becomes resistant to lasers. If you hit it with projectiles, it becomes harder. Lisa looked frustrated. So we can't match their technology. We can't predict their moves, and we can't damage their equipment. What exactly can we do? Jake didn't answer right away. He was thinking about something Dr. Van had said earlier. You mentioned that they eliminated individual thinking from their species. Why would they do that? Because individual thinking creates chaos, Dr. Van said. It makes people unpredictable. It leads to mistakes and inefficiency. Or creativity and innovation, Jake said quietly. Admiral Kess looked at him. What do you mean? Think about it, Jake said. They made themselves perfect by removing the very thing that makes people adapt and grow. They can't improvise because they don't understand improvisation. Amy nodded slowly. Like how their equipment adapts to specific threats but can't handle multiple different attacks at once. Exactly, Jake said, getting excited. Danny, look at this weapon again. What if we didn't try to use it the way it was designed? Danny picked up the Zephyrian weapon and turned it over in his hands. Well, it's clearly some kind of energy projector. But if I connected it to our ship's power grid and reversed the polarity ... it might overload, Lisa finished. Create a feedback loop that could disrupt their other equipment. Dr. Van stared at them. That's completely illogical. You'd be turning their own weapon against itself. Right, Jake said with a grin. And since they can't think individually, they'd never expect it. Over the next few days, Jake and his crew worked with the alien scientists to understand more about the Zephyrians. What they learned was both fascinating and terrifying. The Zephyrians had once been individual beings like any other species, but they had encountered a galactic crisis that nearly destroyed them. To survive, they had voluntarily given up their individual consciousness and merged into a single collective mind. It saved them, Dr. Van explained, but it also changed them. They became incredibly efficient at everything they did. They stopped fighting among themselves. They worked together perfectly. But they also stopped innovating, Jake realized. When did they last develop new technology? Dr. Van checked his records. About 3,000 years ago. Since then, they've only refined existing designs. That's our advantage, Jake said. They're using ancient technology, even if it's very advanced. They can't adapt to truly new ideas. Lisa was studying their battle tactics. Look at this pattern. Every single engagement follows the same basic strategy. They overwhelm the enemy with superior numbers and firepower. Because it always works, Amy said. Why would they change? Because, Danny said, understanding dawning in his eyes. They can't handle an enemy that doesn't follow logical patterns. Jake gathered his crew in their quarters that night. I think I understand why the Zephyrians were afraid of humans. It's not because we're stronger or smarter. It's because we're chaotic. Chaotic how? Amy asked. Think about human history, Jake said. Every time we faced an impossible situation, what did we do? We tried something crazy. Something that had never been done before. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But we always tried. Lisa nodded. Like the time humans decided to go to the moon. Logically, it was impossible. But we did it anyway. Or when we figured out how to fly, Danny added. Birds fly, so humans decided we should fly too. Completely insane, but it worked. The Zephyrians can't understand that kind of thinking. Jake said, they see a problem. They find the most efficient solution, and they implement it perfectly. They don't try stupid ideas that might work. Amy looked thoughtful. So what you're saying is that our biggest weakness as a species is actually our greatest strength against them. Exactly, Jake said. We're unpredictable. We make mistakes. We try things that don't make sense. And sometimes those crazy ideas save the day. The next morning, Jake presented his thoughts to Admiral Kess and the other leaders. We need to stop trying to fight them like a conventional military force. We need to fight them like humans. What does that mean? Admiral Kess asked. It means we do things that make no sense, Jake said. We attack where we're weakest instead of where we're strongest. We retreat when we should advance. We use their own weapons against them in ways they never intended. Dr. Van looked skeptical. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. Maybe, Jake admitted. But disaster is something the Zephyrians can't plan for. They can counter every logical strategy, but they can't counter complete chaos. Admiral Kess was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Captain Morrison, what you're proposing goes against everything we know about military strategy. Good, Jake said, because everything you know about military strategy has been losing this war. And you think your approach will work? Jake looked at his crew, then back at the alien leaders. I think it's the only thing that might work. The Zephyrians destroyed Earth because they were afraid of what humans might do. Let's show them they were right to be afraid. Admiral. Kess nodded slowly. Very well. We'll try your way. But if this fails, we'll all be dead within the month. If we don't try it, Jake said, we'll be dead anyway. As the meeting ended, Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. They were about to gamble everything on them. Idea that human unpredictability could defeat perfect efficiency. It was a crazy plan. But then again, crazy was what humans did best. The target was a Zephyrian supply station in the Kepler sector. Admiral Kess had lost 3 fleets trying to destroy it using traditional tactics. Now it was time to try something different. Jake stood in the briefing room, looking at the faces of pilots and soldiers from a dozen different worlds. They all seemed nervous. This was going to be unlike any battle they had ever fought. Forget everything you've learned about military strategy, Jake began. Today, we're going to do things that will seem crazy, stupid, and impossible. That's exactly the point. A Vortex pilot raised his hand. Captain Morrison, this plan makes no sense. Why would we attack from the most heavily defended side? Because that's what they'll never expect, Jake replied. The Zephyrians have perfect tactical computers. They know exactly where we should attack from, so we're going to attack from everywhere else. Lisa stood up to explain her part of the plan. I'll be leading the fighter squadron. We're going to fly patterns that look completely random. No formation flying, no coordinated attacks, just pure chaos. But that's suicide, another pilot protested. We'll crash into each other. No, we won't, Lisa said calmly. Because we're going to trust each other to improvise. Humans are good at that. We can adapt in real time. Danny stepped forward. I've modified our jamming equipment to create interference patterns that change randomly every few seconds. The Zephyrians won't be able to predict what frequency we'll use next, because even I don't know. And if our own communications get jammed, an Altarian officer asked. Ben will improvise, Danny said with a grin. Make it up as we go along. The Zephyrians can't plan for something we don't plan ourselves. Amy was studying the station's layout. I'll be leading the ground assault team. We're going to enter through the waste disposal system. That's the most dangerous route, Dr. Van pointed out. The radiation levels alone could kill you. Exactly, Amy said, which is why they won't expect it. Sometimes the most dangerous path is the safest one. Jake looked around the room. I know this sounds insane, but remember, we're not trying to win through superior firepower or perfect tactics. We're trying to confuse them so badly that they make mistakes. Admiral Kess stood up. All units prepare for departure. May the stars guide us. As the mixed fleet of human and alien ships approached the Zephyrian station, Jake felt his heart pounding. This was it. The first real test of their new strategy. Zephyrian station was massive, bristling with weapons and surrounded by patrol ships. Its defenses were designed to counter every known form of attack. But Jake wasn't planning a known form of attack. All units, this is Morrison, Jake spoke into his communicator. Remember, no predetermined patterns. Just react to what happens. Lisa, you're up. Lisa launched from the New Horizon in a modified fighter that Danny had equipped with the new jamming system. Behind her came 12 other pilots from different species, all trying to forget their training and think like humans. The first indication that something was wrong came when the Aussie Zephyrian patrol ships couldn't get a target lock. On Lisa's fighter, she was flying in a pattern that seemed completely random, changing direction and speed without any logical reason. Their targeting computers are having trouble, Danny reported. They keep trying to predict where she'd be next, but she's not following any pattern they can recognize. Lisa dove straight down toward the station, then suddenly veered left, then up, then spun in a complete circle. To the Zephyrians, it looked like her ship was malfunctioning. But Lisa was in complete control, using her human intuition to stay ahead of their computers. The other pilots tried to follow her example. Some of them crashed into asteroids because they weren't used to flying so unpredictably. But others began to get the hang of it, making seemingly random maneuvers that kept the Zephyrian gunners confused. Phase 2, Jake announced. Danny, start the jamming. Danny activated his modified equipment, and suddenly the space around the station was filled with electromagnetic chaos. The Zephyrian communication systems, which were designed to handle any logical form of interference, couldn't cope with signals that changed randomly every few seconds. They're trying to adapt, Danny reported with excitement. But every time they adjust their frequency, I change the pattern. They can't keep up. On the station, the Zephyrian defenders were experiencing something they had never encountered before. Their perfect coordination was breaking down. Units that should have been working together were receiving contradictory orders. Ground assault team, go, Jake ordered. Amy led her team through the waste disposal system, just as planned. The radiation was terrible, and the smell was worse, but they had protective equipment that could handle it. More importantly, the Zephyrians had never bothered to heavily guard an entrance that no sane being would use. This is disgusting, muttered one of the Altarian soldiers as they crawled through the pipes. Disgusting is good, Amy replied. Disgusting means they don't expect. Su-S. They emerged inside the station near the main reactor. The few Zephyrian guards they encountered were completely unprepared for an attack from that direction. Amy's team moved quickly, using the confusion to their advantage. Meanwhile, Jake was coordinating the main assault. But instead of following any predetermined battle plan, He was making decisions based on what felt right in the moment. "All ships, concentrate fire on their left flank," he ordered. Then, 30 seconds later, belay that. Everyone attacked the right side now. The constant changes in strategy were driving the Zephyrian defenders crazy. Their tactical computers kept trying to predict the next move, but there was no pattern to predict. "Jake, their formation is starting to break up," Lisa reported from her fighter. "I can see individual ships making different decisions." This was exactly what Jake had hoped for. The Zephyrian hive mind was so confused by the chaotic attack that it was starting to fragment. Individual ships were beginning to act independently, which was something they had never been designed to do. Amy's team reached the main reactor control room. "We're in position," she reported. "But Jake, there's something weird here. The reactor isn't just powering the station. It's connected to something else." "What kind of something else?" Jake asked. "I don't know, but it's big, really big. And it's sending signals into deep space." Jake felt a chill. "Can you disrupt it?" "I think so. But if I'm wrong about what this thing does, we might cause a lot more damage than we intended." "Do it," Jake said without hesitation. "We're way past the point of playing it safe." Amy and her team began placing explosive charges around the reactor's control systems. They weren't trying to destroy the reactor itself, just disrupt its control mechanisms in random ways. The explosions sent shockwaves through the station. But more importantly, they disrupted the mysterious signal that was being transmitted into space. Suddenly, the Zephyrian defenders stopped fighting altogether. Their ships hung motionless in space, as if they had been switched off. "What's happening?" Admiral Kess asked from her command ship. "I think," Jake said slowly, "we just found out how the hive mind works." That signal Amy disrupted was connecting all the Zephyrians in this sector to their central consciousness. Lisa flew past one of the motionless Zephyrian ships. "They're not dead. I can see movement inside. But they're not responding to anything. Because they don't know how to act as individuals," Danny realized. "They've been part of the hive mind for so long that they can't function without it." Amy's voice came over the communicator. "Jake, we need to get out of here. The reactor is going critical." "All units, withdraw immediately," Jake ordered. Mission accomplished. As the combined fleet retreated from the station, Jake watched it explode behind them. But the destruction of the station wasn't the real victory. The real victory was the dozen Zephyrian ships that were still floating helplessly in space. Their crews unable to function without the hive mind's guidance. "We did it," Lisa said, her voice filled with amazement. "We actually did it." "This is just the beginning," Jake said. "Now we know their weakness. They can't handle chaos, and they can't function as individuals. We're going to use that against them." Admiral Kess contacted Jake from her ship. "Captain Morrison, I owe you an apology. I thought your plan was madness." "It was madness," Jake replied. "That's exactly why it worked." As they jumped into hyperspace, Jake felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't experienced since Earth's destruction. They had struck back at the Zephyrians, and they had won. But more importantly, they had learned something crucial about their enemy. The Zephyrians weren't invincible. They could be confused, disrupted, and beaten. The war was far from over, but for the first time in 3 years, the free races had hope, and that hope had a name: human unpredictability. News of the victory at Kepler Station spread through the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in 3 years, the Zephyrian Empire had been defeated in battle. But the real impact wasn't just the destroyed station. It was the fear that followed. Jake stood in the war room, study intercepted Zephyrian communications. The messages were unlike anything the aliens had ever seen before. Where once the Zephyrians had spoken with perfect confidence, now there was uncertainty, confusion, and something that looked very much like panic. "Listen to this," Dr. Van said, playing a recorded transmission. "Zephyrian command to all units. The human variable has been confirmed. All previous tactical calculations are now invalid. Request immediate guidance on counter-chaos protocols." "Counter-chaos protocols?" Amy laughed. "They're trying to develop rules for fighting chaos." "That's like trying to make a square circle." Admiral Kess joined them at the table. "The effect has been even greater than we hoped. 3 Zephyrian fleets have pulled back from active combat zones. They're requesting reinforcements and new tactical doctrines." Jake nodded, but his expression was serious. "Good, but we can't get overconfident. They're smart, even if they think differently than we do. They'll eventually figure out some way to counter our tactics." "So what do we do?" Lisa asked. "We don't give them time to figure it out," Jake said. "We hit them again and again, using different methods each time. We keep them so confused that they can't adapt." Over the next few weeks, Jake and his crew began training coalition forces in what they called human-style warfare. It wasn't easy. Most alien species had trouble thinking in the chaotic, unpredictable way that came naturally to humans. Danny worked with alien engineers to create new types of weapons and equipment. Instead of making things more efficient, he made them more random and unpredictable. "Look at this," he said, showing off a new type of missile. "Most missiles fly in a straight line to their target. This one changes direction randomly every few seconds. The Zephyrians can't predict where it will go because it doesn't know where it's going." Lisa trained pilots from different species to fly in what she called chaos formations. Instead of the neat, organized squadrons they were used to, she taught them to fly in patterns that looked completely random, but were actually carefully controlled chaos. "The key," she explained to a group of nervous Altarian pilots, "is to trust your instincts. Don't think about what you should do next. Just react to what feels right." It was frustrating work. Many of the alien pilots couldn't break free from their logical thinking patterns. But some of them began to understand, especially those who had spent the most time around humans. Amy organized what she called impossible missions, operations that no sane military commander would ever attempt. They attacked heavily defended positions with too few troops, used medical supplies as weapons, and retreated through minefields because the Zephyrians would never expect anyone to be that stupid. "The beautiful thing about impossible missions," Amy explained to her team, "is that they're only impossible if you're thinking logically. If you're thinking like a human, they're just really, really difficult." The results were remarkable. The coalition forces began winning battles they should have lost. They destroyed targets that should have been impregnable. And most importantly, they began to see something in the Zephyrian forces that had never been there before: hesitation. Jake's favorite success story was the Battle of Rigel Prime. The Zephyrians had been besieging the planet for months, using a textbook orbital bombardment that was slowly wearing down the defenders. Every attempt to break the siege had failed. So Jake suggested something insane. Instead of trying to break the siege, they would join it. "You want to help them attack the planet?" Admiral Kess had asked in disbelief. "Not help them," Jake explained. "Confuse them. We'll attack the planet from a different angle, using completely different tactics. The Zephyrians won't know how to respond to 2 different types of attacks at once." The plan worked perfectly. The coalition forces began their own siege of Rigel Prime, but instead of trying to conquer the planet, they were secretly evacuating the population. The Zephyrians, seeing 2 different attack patterns, couldn't decide how to respond. Their tactical computers kept switching between different defensive strategies, creating gaps that the real evacuation ships could exploit. By the time the Zephyrians realized what was happening, most of the planet's population had been safely evacuated. The coalition forces withdrew, leaving the Zephyrians to conquer an empty world. But the psychological impact was even greater than the tactical victory. The Zephyrians had been completely fooled by a strategy that made no logical sense. Their confidence was shattered. Jake began to notice changes in the intercepted communications. The Zephyrians were no longer talking about quick victories and efficient conquests. Instead, they were discussing something they called the human problem. They're starting to obsess over us, Jake told his crew during one of their planning sessions. Look at these communications. They're spending more time trying to figure out how to counter human tactics than they are actually fighting the war. That's good, right? Amy asked. It's very good, Jake said, because while they're trying to solve the puzzle of human unpredictability, they're not conquering new worlds or reinforcing their existing positions. The terror campaign continued for months. The coalition forces launched dozens of attacks using increasingly bizarre tactics. They attacked during ceremonies when the Zephyrians were supposed to be celebrating victories. They used captured Zephyrian equipment in ways it was never designed to be used. They even broadcast human music and poetry into Zephyrian communication channels, causing confusion and system malfunctions. Banny's favorite trick was what he called technological pranks. He would hack into Zephyrian computer systems and make them do things they weren't supposed to do. Navigation systems would give directions to non-existent planets. Weapons would fire at random intervals. Life support systems would play human comedy shows instead of providing status reports. It's not about doing damage, Danny explained. It's about making them question everything. If they can't trust their own technology, they can't function as efficiently. The psychological warfare was working better than anyone had hoped. The Zephyrians, who had once been the most feared force in the galaxy, were beginning to show signs of genuine fear. Jake's proudest moment came when they intercepted a communication from a Zephyrian fleet commander to his superiors. The message was simple, but spoke volumes. Request immediate withdrawal from Sector 12. Suspected human presence detected. Unable to guarantee mission success. They're afraid of us, Lisa said in amazement. An entire Zephyrian fleet is retreating because they think we might be there. The best part, Jake said, is that we weren't even in that sector. They're so paranoid about human tactics that they're seeing threats where none exist. But Jake knew the terror campaign couldn't last forever. The Zephyrians were adaptive, even if they thought differently than humans. Eventually, they would find ways to counter some of the Coalition's tactics. More importantly, the Coalition was running out of resources. The constant attacks were taking their toll on ships and personnel. They needed a decisive victory, something that would end the war once and for all. Jake called a meeting of all the Coalition leaders. We've shown that the Zephyrians can be beaten, he said. But we haven't actually beaten them. They still control most of the galaxy, and they still have thousands of ships. What do you propose? Admiral Kess asked. Jake looked around the room at the faces of beings from a dozen different worlds. We go after their central command. We find the source of their hive mind, and we disrupt it permanently. That's suicide, Dr. Van said. Their central command is in the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. We'd never get close to it. Maybe not with a conventional attack, Jake said. But when have we ever done anything conventional? Admiral Kess leaned forward. What exactly are you thinking? Jake smiled. I'm thinking it's time to show the Zephyrians what happens when humans get really creative. We're going to do something so insane, so impossible, that they'll never see it coming. And if it doesn't work? Admiral Kess asked quietly. Jake looked out at the stars through the viewport. Then we'll die knowing we gave them the fight of their lives. But I don't think it will come to that. The Zephyrians made one critical mistake when they destroyed Earth. What mistake? Dr. Van asked. They left us alive, Jake said. And now they're about to learn why that was the worst decision they ever made. The room fell silent as the weight of Jake's words sank in. The terror campaign had been successful, but it was just the beginning. The real test was still to come. Amy stood up. Whatever this plan is, count me in. Those bastards killed our world. It's time we returned the favor. Danny nodded. I've got some ideas for new equipment that will make their computers wish they'd never been built. Lisa cracked her knuckles. And I've been wanting to test some new flight patterns that are so crazy, even I'm not sure they'll work. Jake smiled at his crew, then turned back to the coalition leaders. Give us 2 weeks to prepare. Then we're going to show the galaxy what 12 humans can do when they set their minds to it. As the meeting ended, Jake felt a familiar feeling rising. The intelligence reports were clear and terrifying. Every Zephyrian fleet in the galaxy was moving toward the Centauri system. Thousands of ships, millions of troops, all converging on the coalition's last stronghold. Jake stood on the bridge of the new horizon, watching the enemy formations approach on a tactical display. The red dots seemed endless, filling the screen like a swarm of angry insects. They're not taking any chances this time, Admiral Kess said over the communicator. Every ship they have is coming here. They want to end this war once and for all. Good, Jake replied. That means they're scared. Scared people make mistakes. Lisa looked up from her pilot station. Jake, there are more ships out there than we have ammunition for. Even if every shot hits perfectly, we can't destroy them all. We're not going to fight them all, Jake said calmly. We're going to do something much more interesting. Dr. Van appeared on the main screen from his research ship. Captain Morrison, our scouts have identified the Zephyrian command vessel. It's a massive ship at the center of their formation. Our analysis suggests it houses the primary node of their hive mind. Perfect, Jake said. That's our target. But it's impossible to reach, Dr. Van protested. There are hundreds of ships protecting it. No single vessel could get through those defenses. Jake smiled. Who said anything about a single vessel? Over the next hour, Jake explained his plan to the coalition leaders. As he spoke, their expressions changed from confusion to disbelief, to something that might have been admiration for his sheer audacity. You want to use our entire fleet as a distraction, Admiral Kess said slowly, while you and your crew infiltrate their command ship using a captured Zephyrian vessel. That's the basic idea, Jake said, but with a few human improvements. Danny had been working nonstop for 2 weeks, modifying a captured Zephyrian transport ship. I've installed every piece of chaos-generating equipment I could think of, he explained. Jamming systems, signal scramblers, even a device that broadcasts random human thoughts directly into their communication networks. Random human thoughts? Admiral Kess asked. Everything from shopping lists to love songs, Danny said with a grin. The hive mind won't know what to do with information that random and emotional. Amy had been studying the layout of Zephyrian command ships. The central consciousness is housed in a biomechanical construct at the heart of the ship. It's heavily protected, but there's one weakness. It needs constant data input to function. If we can disrupt that input, the whole hive mind could collapse, Jake finished, at least temporarily. And temporarily might be enough. Lisa had been practicing with the captured ship's controls. I think I can fly this thing, but it won't be easy. Zephyrian ships are designed for perfect coordination, not individual piloting. Every maneuver feels like fighting the ship itself. That's okay, Jake said. We're not trying to fly it perfectly. We're trying to fly it like humans. The final battle began with the coalition fleet engaging the Zephyrian armada in what appeared to be a desperate last stand. Admiral Kess commanded the defense from her flagship, using every conventional tactic she knew to buy time for Jake's mission. The space around, Centauri, filled with weapons, fire, and explosions. Ships on both sides were destroyed in the opening. Minutes of combat. But the coalition forces were fighting with a new kind of desperation, the kind that comes from knowing this is truly the last chance. While the main battle raged, Jake and his crew approached the Zephyrian command ship in their disguised vessel. Danny's modifications were working perfectly. To the Zephyrian sensors, they looked like just another transport bringing supplies to the command ship. So far, so good, Lisa muttered as she guided the ship through the defensive perimeter. But I don't think this disguise will hold up to close inspection. It doesn't have to, Jake said. We just need to get close enough. They docked with the command ship without challenge. The Zephyrian security systems, designed to detect logical threats, couldn't comprehend that someone would be insane enough to attack the most heavily defended ship in their fleet. The interior of the command ship was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. The corridors were filled with a strange, organic-looking technology that seemed to pulse with its own life. Zephyrian crew members moved through the halls with perfect coordination, each one knowing exactly where to go and what to do. "This place gives me the creeps," Amy whispered as they made their way toward the central chamber. "It's like being inside a giant brain." "That's essentially what it is," Jake replied. "The entire ship is an extension of the hive mind." They encountered very little resistance. The Zephyrians simply couldn't conceive of an attack coming from inside their most secure facility. The few guards they met were easily avoided or quietly neutralized. The central chamber was massive, filled with a biomechanical construct that stretched from floor to ceiling. Cables and organic conduits connected it to every part of the ship. At its center was a pulsing mass of tissue and circuitry that could only be the physical manifestation of the Zephyrian collective consciousness. "That's it," Jake said quietly. "The brain of their entire species." Danny began setting up his equipment. "I can't destroy this thing, but I might be able to confuse it. If I introduce enough random data into its input streams." "Do it, Jake," said. Danny activated his chaos generators, and immediately the chamber filled with the sounds of human music, poetry, and random conversation. The construct began to pulse erratically as it tried to process information that made no logical sense. Amy was working on the ship's life support systems. "I'm introducing random failures throughout the ship. Nothing dangerous, just enough to create confusion." Lisa had found the ship's navigation controls. "I'm feeding false position data to their fleet coordination system. It should make their formations start drifting apart." Jake watched the construct's reactions with fascination. The Zephyrian hive mind, which had never encountered true chaos, was struggling to cope with the flood of random, emotional, and illogical human thoughts that Danny was broadcasting into its consciousness. "It's working," Jake said with excitement. "Look at the neural activity patterns. It's trying to make sense of human emotions, and failing completely." Through the ship's internal communication system, they could hear the growing confusion among the Zephyrian crew. Orders were being contradicted, systems were malfunctioning, and for the first time in their species' history, individual Zephyrians were beginning to question the collective consciousness. "Jake," Lisa called out, "the main fleet is breaking. Formation. Their ships are starting to move independently." "Perfect," Jake said. "Amy, how are those life support failures coming?" "Environmental controls are fluctuating randomly throughout the ship," Amy reported. "Temperature, lighting, even artificial gravity. The crew doesn't know how to handle system failures that don't follow any pattern." Danny's equipment was working beyond their wildest hopes. The construct was now flashing in rapid, chaotic patterns as human thoughts, emotions, and memories flooded its consciousness. The hive mind, which had been built on logic and efficiency, was drowning in creativity and chaos. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The Zephyrians had finally realized what was happening, but it was too late. The damage to their collective consciousness was spreading throughout their fleet. "Time to go," Jake announced. "We've done what we came to do." They fought their way back to their ship as confused Zephyrian crew members tried to stop them. But the guards were acting as individuals now, without the perfect coordination of the hive mind, and they were no match for humans who thrived on improvisation. As they escaped from the command ship, Jake watched the Zephyrian fleet through the viewports. Ships that had moved in perfect formation just hours earlier were now drifting aimlessly. Some were firing on each other, apparently unable to distinguish friend from foe without the guidance of the collective consciousness. "My God," Lisa whispered. "We actually did it. We broke their hive mind." "Admiral Kess, this is Morrison." Jake called over the communicator. "Mission accomplished. The Zephyrian fleet is in complete disarray." "I can see that," Admiral Kess replied, her voice filled with amazement. "Half their ships have stopped fighting entirely. The others are attacking each other." "What did you do?" "We introduced them to humanity," Jake said simply. "Turns out they couldn't handle it. The battle was over within hours. Without the guidance of their collective consciousness, the Zephyrian forces simply fell apart. Some ships surrendered, others fled, and many just drifted in space as their crews tried to figure out how to function as individuals. The war wasn't completely over. There were still Zephyrian colonies scattered throughout the galaxy, and it would take time to help them transition from collective consciousness to individual thinking. But the Empire was broken, its perfect unity shattered forever. Jake stood on the observation deck of the New Horizon, looking out at the stars. Earth was gone, but humanity lived on. They had saved the galaxy, not through superior weapons or technology, but through the very thing that made them human: their beautiful, chaotic, unpredictable individuality. Amy joined him at the viewport. "So what now?" "We've won the war, but we're still the last humans in the universe," Jake smiled. "Are we? I think we just taught an entire galaxy how to think like